In my opinion, this is such a strange phone because on one hand, we have a 108 megapixel sensor found in the Samsung S22 Ultra, as well as having 8GB of RAM, but on the other hand, this has an LCD screen with a Snapdragon 695 5G chip that is found in the previous model, and technically has inferior camera specs to the model before that, which I'll explain what that means later. This is the OnePlus Nord N30 5G, a strange phone that can actually be good at times. And I'm not joking, there is some charm to this phone. Being a mid-range phone, the design is pretty basic and predictable. Plastic mid-frame with the volume buttons and SD card SIM tray combo on the left, fingerprint power button combo on the right, microphone on the top, and the bottom has the headset jack microphone, USB-C 2.0 port, and the two oval loudspeaker that pairs with the top one for middling dual speakers that isn't the best, but is definitely better than the Solana Saga. The back of course also being a shiny plastic with two big camera bumps and an odd design flash unit. The front, like I said, has a slit for the earpiece as well as having a hole punch for the front camera. This 6.72-inch IPS LCD is 120Hz for the refresh rate and has decent bezels and chin for the 1080p screen. As for sizing, this is a tall 6.52-inch phone with a light feeling weight at 195 grams, which doesn't sound super light, but the plastic build does help for this. Yep, the camera covers and front screen are the only glass on this phone, which is a good thing for those that like to break stuff, but bad because look at this deep scratch on the back. It's on here forever. Moving inside, like I said, we get the Snapdragon 695 5G chip with 8GB of RAM and 128GB of UFS 2.2 storage to give us enough to play games, but the processor and screen will leave you wanting more power out of this phone. That said, operation-wise it's fine. This runs Android 14, which it's here to stay, but as of March 2026, it's still getting security patches, which is kind of cool. Opening apps is fine, and I would say that the 120Hz screen is borderline bad, but good enough to where the number actually has some merit to it, but I think that 8GB of RAM does wonders for this phone, given that I use the Nord N30 5G with the same processor and 6GB of RAM on Android 12, and that phone definitely felt slow. It's a 60Hz panel, but still, kind of like the Pixel 4a 5G and the Pixel 5, having more RAM and a faster screen will always be the best. Like I said, we have the headset jack and dual speakers, which feels mid-range or budget, so don't expect studio quality speakers, but still a good choice to see rather than a single speaker, which is on par for devices in its class. Also, dual speakers are easy to do, even the Nord N100 had them. Meanwhile, the Samsung A17 5G still has a single speaker. We only get 5s, Wi-Fi 5, Bluetooth 5.1, and 5G of course, but only USB 2.0, which is normal, as well as NFC. What we also get is more 5s, as in 5000 mAh battery with 50 watts of wired charging, but it can go to 67 watts, and I'm pretty sure I saw this happen on my 80 to 100 watt charger that I use with the OnePlus 13. I tested on that charger and got an average of 30 to 40 watts of charging from 10 to 80%, and it took about 30 minutes to go from 1 to 74%, and 100% was about 51 minutes. On a normal charger, expect 12 to 18 watts out of this, which sounds slow, but charges at about 1% a minute, so not terrible. And you might need it because the battery is decent. It's not bad, but it's also not as great as some other 5000 mAh phones, but always remember that this is a used, aging phone. Your mileage may be worse. But like I said, performance on this phone overall is good, but it is still a 5-year-old budget processor. And there are moments like, for example, you might notice download speed might be a little bit slower compared to other devices that have Wi-Fi 6, even though they're the same device. This is something I experienced before, and I was never able to replicate it on video, so just trust me on that one. It's things like that that remind you no matter how much you don't care, a budget phone will always have budget aspects that you've never thought of. Gone are the days of pointless cameras and budget phones being bad, right? When 5G phones came out, I thought there was no way that they could be bad because of the extra power needed for 5G. I was wrong. I had that same philosophy for high megapixel cameras, and I was also proven wrong there too. A 16 megapixel camera on the front is not great, just like the 1080p 30 frames per second video max. Colors are fine, but the detail to me is just crunchy, if that makes sense. But on the back, we have the 2 megapixel depth camera and 2 megapixel macro camera, which, yeah. Then we have the real camera, a 108 megapixel 1/1.67 inch Samsung HM6. That sounds great. Again, only 20% smaller than the HM3 that Samsung uses on the S21 Ultra and S22 Ultra, and the quality is this. And no, there's no optical image stabilization. Sure, it's not terrible, but mid-range, as it should be, because that's kind of the whole point of this. My problem is that we get 1080p at 30 frames per second for video, and the reason why is strange and frustrating to me, so join me down this small rabbit hole. So the Qualcomm Snapdragon 695 and 690 are odd because the Nord N10 5G with the latter could record 4K at 30 frames per second. So what's up? Well, that's because of the processor. Furthermore, this HM6 camera sensor can actually capture 8K at 24 frames per second and 4K at 120 frames per second. But I don't think any phone that they put this camera in can go over 4K at 30 frames per second because this camera is paired with a weak processor and in turn a weak ISP, which gives you images like you're seeing now, which is kind of cool because I think that that's going to be the future, is a phone with one camera. Even though technically this has 3 cameras on the back. They say you get 3 times lossless photos, but let's compare this to the 12 megapixel bin shot to the 3x 12 megapixel bin shot and a 108 megapixel shot to see if the 3x is actually just cropped in on that 108 megapixel sensor, or to see if it looks better than both of them. Anyways, disappointing, but I guess not technically because it convinced me to make this into its own section. Now, while not horrible, it's not great. The camera is unforgivable and the battery is fine for me, but the processor makes using this phone feel kind of awkward. OnePlus budget phones feel like they're a step above Motorola and Samsung, and yes, I know it's a mid-range, but after a couple of years, come on, these are all budget phones. I know the $300 to $400 price tag wasn't budget, geez, that just was not great. But the under $100 price for used now is pretty reasonable. It has a headset jack and an SD card, which people love for some reason. It's like if growing your own food was the same flavor and healthiness as a $2 bunch at the store, you'd probably just want to get it at the store instead of trying to make it yourself. What I'm trying to say is that I don't think buying a phone with a headset jack and SD card slot is worth the hassle of having a budget phone in general. But if you came here to reassure your choice of buying this phone, you're probably lying because you've probably already clicked off by now. But I do really like this phone for what its purpose is. It isn't the prettiest looking phone, but under an hour for a full charge is pretty great on a cheaper phone. It is a OnePlus device, so we do get stuff like double tap to wake and sleep, a pretty good face unlock for being a budget phone, and auto enter after 4 digits. There's no always on display or any active display, which is kind of annoying. And given that it is an LCD, the screen isn't great, but I guess there's no worries of PWM, and best of all, this is cheap to replace. That said, getting more than the screen and battery might be a challenge, but the cost isn't. That vibrating motor though, there's no way to make this thing better. It's definitely budget level vibrations. Budget and mid-range phones are strange because, like I said, they all become budget phones at some point. I don't think this will get many updates, so that one major update was expected. I guess that's technically a benefit that goes towards Samsung, but software performance is not always the same as what OnePlus puts on their phones, kind of like how the Xcover Pro has the same processor as the Nothing Phone 1, and yes, I know that's not a OnePlus phone, but that phone is just better operation-wise. Should you buy this? Probably not. Is it a bad phone? Absolutely not. And yes, this is the phone that I got from the flea market for $3 as is. I got very lucky there. And that's my review of the OnePlus Nord N30 5G, a budget phone that's actually decent. But what do you think? Let me know, and as always, thanks for joining the 1%, and thanks for watching.